Memes. The DNA of the soul.
Welcome, I'm your host Kenny, and you're listening to Social Sleuth. You know the drill, we're back to yap. Here at Social Sleuth, we investigate and question the little bites of the internet we have all come to love, memes. Comedy is at their core, but sometimes comedic lines are blurred within the meme world, and as a social sleuth, I'm called to investigate. What role do these viral and rapidly adapting bites of expression, whether text, images, or videos, play in the larger conversations of misinformation, digital literacy, and censorship? Here to help us dive into the topic of memes and internet culture is my longtime friend Marnus, the first person I met at university, and a fellow sociology grad. In this inaugural episode, Marnus and I yap about internet culture, content consumption, surveillance, and everything in between. So without further ado...
Drum roll, please. Can anybody guess?
Welcome, Marnus.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we'll get right into it. How do you define a meme?
Ooh, that's interesting. A meme is... Depending on the context, it could be making fun of a situation, it could be reporting news, it could be a way to get your word out. One thing I'm thinking of is the Swifties for Kamala or the Harris HQ memes during the election, where Gen Z information around policies was presented through memes. Memes could be a funny picture, poking fun at something, it could be a form of propaganda.
Yeah, just make America laugh again.
I like that.
Awesome. So, I guess a little bit of the social sleuth philosophy. We're looking at memes as units of cultural exchange. How would you describe the digital content you consume? What side of the internet are you on?
I would say it is very tailored. You know, that algorithm, it do be working overtime.
It do be.
I find the two social media apps I use the most tends to be Instagram and TikTok. My TikTok content's very tailored towards me, very niche. I get a lot of book talk. It's amazing. I 10 out of 10 would recommend, but also be ready for the chance to get traumatized. I also find the moment I follow a celebrity or someone in a very niche category, I all of a sudden get so many suggested posts. Hi, everyone, I'm gay. Just putting that out there. Whenever I follow an attractive man's on social media, 2 or 3 suggestions come up about this one thing that I liked or this one person that I followed. So it's very intuitive, very tailored. I'm also thinking in the context of confirmation bias for politics or news. My feed is very tailored towards me. So that definitely affects the sort of information and knowledge that I get on certain topics and how I form my opinion. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah. I remember my friend and I were talking about local bakeries, and for the next week I kept getting ads from Cobb's and local bread as well. That I don't particularly like, because it's where is this information going, and also what are they doing with it? Like the bread one is probably a bad example, but definitely talking about things like political orientation or like what groups you belong to, or I know in the States right now being queer is a hot topic, so it's who knows what's being done with this information.
Is it just going to be for like capitalistic means, for marketing, or is it government surveillance? Like without putting our tinfoil helmets on, but it is a
lot
thing.
About X now with Elon Musk. He bought it to protect free speech. I'm hoping the listeners could sense the hint of sarcasm in my voice. And then, yeah, he recently kicked off Stephen King for calling him the First Lady of the United States, which not so much for free speech. But back to my point, they're in hot water recently for selling people's data and information, especially because Elon Musk is going to be part of the US government. So a lot of people are moving to a new app called Blue Sky in order to not have their information being sold to the highest bidder. Total random idea that just popped into my head. I remember reading the story where this lady did the 23andMe, those ancestry things, and spit into a tube. And she got convicted of a crime that happened something like 10 years or so ago. Definitely don't quote me on this. But the fact they used DNA evidence submitted through a private company to prosecute someone for a crime committed years ago.
Wild. And it's not, I don't think it's even about one platform or the other. It's easy to point fun at X-Men.
Oh, totally.
But it's everything.
Yeah,
Like you see
or
with
Meta
all
with
of
Mark
it.
Zuckerberg.
Exactly. You can't escape it.
Whenever I post on Instagram, it goes, hey, do you want to make the same post on Facebook? I'm like, hey, dear God, no. What I post on Instagram is very different than what I post on Facebook. I've got the family on Facebook. But yeah, it's crazy how a few rich white guys owns the entire social media platform in which we engage with. We get information, stuff getting censored, misinformation.
My next question would be, knowing about this surveillance, does that change how you engage online?
Yes, kind of. On one hand, I know I'm not funding terrorist organizations, so in one sense, I'm not really doing anything wrong when I'm engaging online. That gives me a sense of security. On the other hand, you never know when your particular set of beliefs or identity might become a political issue. And so that also makes me a little bit nervous, especially where we are heading towards as a society.
Like
with
10 years ago, something that you would post online with no repercussions or reaction from anybody would be received way different today. For better or for worse.
100%. This is a very extreme example, but there was the Nick Fuentes guy on social media. He was going around telling women, your body, my choice, wearing a big, like, MAGA hat. And since then, he's been completely doxxed. His house has been burned down. Post, like, one day, and then a couple days later, I saw his house burned down and he's been doxxed. These things happen incredibly fast. That was a very extreme example, but you never know. A post might anger the wrong person who will dox you. You can never be too safe.
And the internet doesn't really have a due process. There's no judge and jury.
Even when we were talking about this podcast, we were making a joke like, oh, haha, let's not get cancelled. That shows how, for lack of a better word, sensitive people have become. But I don't like calling people sensitive online because, you know,
it's a hard one to say because there can be justified reasons for having an emotional response.
Yeah, like this Nick Fuentes fuck versus I made a joke online that some person
or I shared a meme that was political in nature, satirical, and it gets taken in a different context by somebody else.
I like what you just said about the satire piece because so many people out there do not understand satire, especially when it comes to memes. You know, sometimes a meme, like I find I've been seeing a lot of memes pop up with edgy humor, and I'll go and look at the comments and it'll be people who completely miss the irony of this meme or miss like what's funny and satirical about it and just taking it at face value. So I guess definitely on the internet there is, because you're more so just reading stuff, you can't really get the tone or context for it. So definitely within surveillance and posting stuff online, I would say be very important to take a look at, I guess, the cultural context of that joke that you're posting.
Absolutely. Oh my God. If anybody random looked at the content I like or share to friends and family, they would probably think I was some horrible person if they just looked at it as truth or not for the multi-layered jokes they are.
Truly.
Ridiculous and atrocious.
As
it's obviously a joke.
Exactly. Which is why I feel like, especially for memes, you need a certain amount of internet literacy or culture to understand those memes, because there are some memes today where like I'll look at it and laugh, but then I'll show my Gen X coworker who does not understand whatsoever. So a lot of these memes, they're funny because they're based off of a joke from a couple years ago that's been like building on itself, and now it's just become a hee hee hoo hoo ha ha.
Exactly. Like Giga Chad.
Exactly.
If you didn't know the original Chad, Giga Chad probably is pretty random.
Or Karens as well. A couple years back, haha, she's being a Karen. But now, I don't think any children are being named Karen. That shows how internet culture affects daily life.
So we've obviously addressed the power that memes have in various ways. People aren't naming their kids Karen. People are being doxxed. We have free speech, but then we also don't want the harms because it is powerful. They're units of cultural exchange. It's constantly changing, and I guess, the rapidness that comes with user-created content. It's not just a couple people sending email chains and
Totally.
everybody is so involved. To bring it back to the question, how do we regulate it?
I don't think a lot of people understand that freedom from speech doesn't mean freedom from the repercussions of what you've said. So by all means, like, freedom of speech is something that I hold very important. Everybody should have the ability to express their emotions and express what they feel, but it goes back to fuck around and find out, right?
If the right comes with responsibility.
Exactly. And in regards to regulation, it's difficult. I wouldn't know where to begin because a lot of meme culture that our generation holds near and dear to our heart it mostly comes from unregulated internet access as kids. My parents, in their mind, the internet or social media is Facebook, whereas our generation grew up with it. We view it as a tool or sort of almost an extension of our lives online. And which is why we get all of these memes now, and we are so proficient in internet culture. That being said, there are a lot of predators online. There's a lot of misinformation online. I'm also thinking about this newer generation of younger boys and the Andrew Tate, like,
the manosphere.
the red pill. Or I have a friend who's a teacher, and she was saying to me that a lot of the younger boys don't respect her authority as a woman because they're brought up in this hyper masculine sphere of the internet. So that alone definitely, I feel like, shows the need that there needs to be some sort of regulation online. It's very difficult because then it goes back to who is making those regulations. What are their goals? What do they hope to get done by this? What's their agenda?
To regulate it, you have to kind of say what's right and what's wrong.
Exactly.
Which
and
is really hard.
Also, what is right and what is wrong? I feel like, there are some things set in stone, like murder, discrimination, any sort of, like, yes, bad, but also in stuff like politics, or because I know especially amongst the left there is so much discourse to a point where it's like, who has the right opinions and beliefs? And if we go off of that regulation, does that also means that everyone who disagree with them are wrong or labeled as an outcast? I see the need for internet regulation, but it would be difficult to get it right and done in a meaningful way.
Exactly. About this sort of, like, children using this internet,
yes.
And Andrew Tate's world that he's painted that brings in children isn't the real world, and it's creating this sort of synthetic bubble around kids to be, not to use it lightly, but indoctrinated in a way that maybe as a 24-year-old man, you see it and you have the life experience or the digital literacy to see through these claims and not be pulled in. But when you're 10, 11, 12, you don't have those skills, just like when we were unregulated on the internet. I remember watching Fred, or Annoying Orange, on YouTube. That was a 16 or 17-year-old making content, where it was people my age or a few years older making content I was consuming. Now we have Andrew Tate, a 40-plus-year-old man influencing young boys. It's changed. Now it's adults making content for children because they can make money off of it. And it's,
truly.
It's a market.
I'm also thinking of 10-year-olds in the Sephora drama.
Oh my God.
Girls who are, like 10, 11, 12, going into Sephora and buying a $60 anti-aging moisturizer, which is like, for what? You put anti-aging moisturizer on a 12-year-old, they'll disappear. You know? I grew up watching Jeffree Star and James Charles and Tati and all of these people. And funny enough, as a teenager, whenever a new concealer was being reviewed, I would be the first one to buy that concealer with my pocket money from my job. But now I'll scroll and see, these same influencers promoting a mascara or something. Be like, wow, they were paid to say this. You can tell in the way they're talking about the product and how amazing it looks. I'm thinking of this influencer on TikTok. She was promoting mascara, but wearing false eyelashes between takes. And so many kids went and bought that fucking mascara because they believed it was going to give them these like sky high beautiful eyelashes. Or even a example from our generation, the Kylie Jenner lip kits. I don't know if you remember those.
The craze.
Or the kids like sucking on shot glasses. And I'm guessing at that age, we didn't have the brain to realize maybe I shouldn't be sucking on this shot glass or buy a $54 lip kit from Kylie Jenner online. But now we do. So
I guess to bring that into the regulation, we see hashtag ad or some sort of ad disclaimer, which I don't know if that works for kids.
I think it would be a really good start to have some sort of law or something whenever you are promoting a product that you've been paid for. You need to very much go out of your way to say, this is a product that I've been paid to promote, and not just the hashtag ad at the bottom. Because I feel like if you really do go out of your way to say, listen, L'Oreal paid me a fuck ton of money to push this mascara. Here's what I like about it. That I could see working. Or even, I feel like, as controversial as he is, Jeffree Star, he's gone through so many scandals, or people have tried to cancel him so many times. But the reason I feel like he keeps coming back is he, does have a lot of money. So he doesn't take paid promotions. People know that if he reviews a product, he went and bought it with his own money. Because everyone kicked him off of their PR list for being brutally honest. And he straight up said, this product is shit. Don't waste your money. Or this product is real. Go for it. And I feel like that's where a lot of his trust and following comes from, is because people knows that he wouldn't, or he doesn't lie to them or need L'Oreal's money and stuff. So definitely transparency, I feel like
it's hard to be
really big.
That authentic on the internet now.
Oh yeah.
Like, it's just not a thing.
No.
I can't think of anyone else other than Jeffree Star off the top of my head that is that brutally honest. Obviously he has the means to not get paid. But
interrupting, but that's a very important point I feel like you just made. Whenever we talk about regulation, it's normally only the bigger companies or like the big people who can adhere to regulations because they have funds and resources to allocate in order to make sure they're following procedure. Whereas a startup, like a brand new influencer, they're not going to be able to adhere by all of those regulations and standards because they're still making it.
It's hard. It's hard out there on the internet.
It is.
I guess to sort of circle back to what you were saying about being a kid on the internet and how now looking back, as much as we probably, like every other teenager would be like, I was totally fine. I could make my own decisions.
Yeah.
Yada, yada, yada. And now you look back, you were just a stupid kid sort of thing. Australia is looking at putting in, maybe it's already coming, just in talks about 16 plus to be on social media. In Canada, it's 13.
I think so.
Major social medias. And obviously there's no way to verify that. And you also have adult-led creator accounts for children, so it's not perfect. But do you think that could help?
I see the intent behind it and why people are pushing for this. I don't know if I necessarily agree. For our generation, the internet is an extension of our lives. It's a tool. Whereas I feel like some of the older folks, like I said, in my mom's view, the internet is Facebook.
Yeah.
But I'm also thinking of a lot of kids who are either in, not a great household or like a closeted queer kids or stuff. To speak on my experience, I grew up in a very traditional Christian household. Why do Christians always have the gayest kids? But a very big sense of me coming to terms with my identity is having internet access and realizing I'm not weird or gross or disgusting for being like this. This is completely normal, and there are all of these people just like me out there. And I'm worried that because once you're at 16, you've gone through the process of socialization, you're starting to form opinions and stuff about who you are as a person. And at that age, I feel like it's almost a bit too late for some kids, but also, there are predators and stuff online and so many misinformation and paid sponsorships being shoved down kids' throats that it's a very difficult, like, I'm struggling to draw the line because, yes, unregulated internet access as a kid, it did some damage, but also I am alive and at peace with myself today because of the internet. Yeah. So,
we're all on it and chronically online.
Yeah,
benefits to it, and there's community within the internet.
Exactly.
And it's not all evil and bad and scary. There's lots of really good things that the internet provides us. So I think that it totally makes sense. And being 15 and 16 sucks already, even if there's this resource of exposure to a bigger world. I think it's also hard growing up in a fairly urban environment. Already had all that exposure sort of in everyday life. So to think there's also kids that grow up in rural areas or just smaller towns that the internet is sort of the exposure to more people and can help find identity.
When it comes to regulation, I feel like it's difficult also because, especially when it comes to parenting, but I feel like it should be on parents to warn their kids. There are people out there who wish to do you harm, or there are like paid ads and stuff, or photoshopping like celebrities and stuff. I feel like parents should be having conversations with kids from a very young age. Everything you see out there is tailored or edited in some sort of way. So just be cautious and mindful of that. But then also, like I said, everyone has a different parenting style. Some are more hands-on, some people are more hands-off when it comes to their kids. So I don't feel like it would be good to place that responsibility on parents.
I used to think that parents are just all collectively going to be able to prepare their kids for the internet, especially if they're not digitally literate themselves as well. Like it'd be perfect, and that's sort of the perfect world, is that they would have support to tackle the internet as if it was any other social setting, but it's just not the reality.
I definitely would like to see some regulation. It's difficult because we don't want to take away this massive resource or big tool. It would have to be mindful.
I thought of the stupidest idea of like meme class in school.
You know what?
Learn about Harambe.
That could be interesting though.
Yeah.
Because like a federally regulated just class on like internet culture or the way to just be a person online, that could be like very valuable.
Community member. It's also so crazy too because we have a global internet where people are interacting with people in so many different cultures, not a homogenous internet culture, right? It's wild.
I also feel like, especially for equity and inclusion, a lot of people in those like rural small towns and stuff, they're surrounded by people they've known all their life, most likely the same race as them, and so they'll move to the big city and have all of these small-minded or like bigoted beliefs, where I feel like the internet is a valuable tool for exposing kids to different ideas, people, and identities.
It goes both ways as well, right? I don't know if you knew this, but they started studying memes, like how we sort of know them to be today in their infancy, of course, when they were email chains or on 4chan before that went off the rails, called memetics. I think I'm saying that right. And it was a study of memes, looking at them as cultural units of exchange. And it died down as if it was some sort of fad. And then I've noticed in creating this podcast that it's starting to come up again. Specifically, I've seen a variety calling memes as being these really powerful cultural tools. I'm sure the same sentiment is on the whole political spectrum, because I would agree they are. But it's interesting that it's taken almost 30 years to realize it's not just a fad. This is the way we're communicating. Like you shared earlier, you found out about Jake Paul beating Mike Tyson through a
memes.
Meme. Or that Trump won the election through memes. Yeah. I follow the Fake News Network. It's one of my favorite accounts. They're so ridiculous.
Must be a pretty good source of entertainment.
Exactly.
I mean, memes, like, I feel like it's something that humans have always done. We have this sort of like intrinsic need to express ourselves. Like, I'm thinking about like archaeologists going in and studying caves from 50,000 years ago, ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. There's always been this sense of portraying ourselves through art or through
symbols.
Yes,
Yeah.
and memes is just the 21st century version of that. Which, funny enough, I saw this meme recently where it's like, in 3,000 years, archaeologists are trying to decipher one of the memes today, and it was the Haktua meme. And you wouldn't necessarily be able to in 3,000 years because you'll need the context behind that. Mm-hmm. So it's always been like a way for us to tell stories and express ourselves.
What do you think of countries, for example, Saudi Arabia's proposed media law and global digital content safe harbor law? They're two different policies that seek to regulate individual sharing as well as tech companies themselves. And then we see the UK and Canada and the EU all sort of trying to figure out, and that's sort of the reason we're talking about it today, but figure out how we can regulate it and how we can stop hate speech without infringing on people's rights. Does that concern you?
I don't like that, just the idea of a government or an entity self-electing to promote their own virtues and values. I don't love that, especially Saudi Arabia with all of their oil money. And yeah, it does feel like there are some ulterior motives, and I'm saying that without popping on my tinfoil hat as well. If anything, I think one country being in charge of setting that precedent can be incredibly dangerous, because then also it's a ruling body with, I guess, once again, their own agenda. In an ideal world, we'd have a council to oversee the internet. But then I'm also thinking that so say for argument's sake, there is like a couple countries put on this council of determining what's right from wrong. My guess is it's probably going to be Western countries, since that's where a vast majority of the social media lies. I can see something like that also being a tool for imperialism, especially when it comes to the US's interests. Stuff like capitalism and neoliberalism will be very strongly reinforced if it's the US, the UK. Well, I would love to see how they would try and apply that. It would be super interesting.
Because you think we already have laws in different countries that would govern citizens of those countries and how they act online. If you commit fraud online, you would get prosecuted by whatever country you live in for that, or dox somebody or threatening them. Those sorts of things are already encompassed within law, at least in Canada. I can't speak for other places.
No, totally.
You remember Amanda Todd?
Yes. She was from Poco.
Exactly. She was from Poco, and that was online harassment and for child exploitation is exactly what it is. But that case, as far as I know, was still being pursued, even though that guy had gone to some safe country that they couldn't be persecuted. So the laws that we already have that would protect people aren't even being able to be executed properly. I guess to sort of very much circle back to your original point of, because you know that you're not funding terrorists, you're not doing anything crazy on the internet, it doesn't impact you, but we worry about what the future could hold. Maybe the rules of the game have changed, which I think is where a lot of people's anxiety gets about it as well, is that today it's fine, but we don't know about tomorrow.
I recently started rewatching Friends, and Friends, it was late 90s, early 2000s, and a lot of the jokes did not age well. They aged like milk. A lot of jokes are about the male character's masculinity and the female character's ability to stay skinny and keep a house and stuff like that. That's where a lot of humor comes from. And watching it now, it's not good.
My favorite movie, Bring It On, that I've watched since it came out. I've seen it a million times, and every time I watch it again, I'm like, oh, that would not fly today. Still my favorite movie.
Oh, truly.
And I think that it's the same with the internet. You can consume things without being consumed by them. Not to be deep or philosophical or whatever. Wow. But it's like, I'm going to read something about flat earthers. That doesn't mean that I think the earth is flat.
The scary thing with the internet is it is forever. So I feel like, because there is the ongoing joke of finding someone's racist tweets from back in the day. By all means, people should be held accountable for what they post. But I also feel like we've lost our sense of grace or understanding. Yes, what they wrote was foul and should not have been posted, but that was 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Like, one would hope they've grown.
I could see if that is like still their present day view, and then you go back and look and oh, this has been going on a long time. There's a long history of this. But if somebody is giving you no reason to believe that they are that type of person, if there's no question of it, it seems like you're trying to look for something just to find something.
Yeah.
Especially too when if they were 10 or 12 years old. It's like, yeah, it's not appropriate.
Truly.
And I would hope that now that they're an adult, they've like retired those beliefs. What does bringing up that past, if they've already taken the actions, do? It doesn't fix it anymore.
Yeah.
You can't undo it.
Truly.
Right? Because that's more of like a personal, philosophical of can you forgive and forget certain things, and like where's the line?
Can people truly change?
That's a big question. Yeah.
Oh my
That's a
God, look
different
at us.
podcast. We're thinking big things. I've been reading a lot about, it's interesting that we talk so much about youth and kids. I've been watching YouTube video essays about Gen Alpha and how they can't use the internet in the same way that Gen Z and millennials can, because it was probably the same for you. We just figured it out.
Yeah.
You just hopped on the family computer, found different places on the internet and figured out how to use all the different applications, or you would learn a bit in school maybe, but it was really just DIY. There wasn't apps, like it wasn't a smartphone. And now kids are they can only use apps.
I blame the iPad kids.
Oh, it's all the iPad kids' fault.
Actually, back to the question about Australia and D16. Mm-hmm. 16's a bit old, but I am so against iPad kids or seeing kids with like the screen or like being glued in front of the screen 24/7. I feel like there definitely needs to be regulation.
It's like instead of the internet culture being complementary to wherever you live's culture, it's taking over. It's taking away, which it's hard for me to see that because that's not my lived reality. You have a life outside of being online as much as it's a part of us, but we still have community and people around us. But now kids they can only have one.
A lot of these iPad kids, they were also COVID kids who weren't able to go to preschool or first grade. So I think it's a combination of not having that early childhood, going out and interacting with kids, plus just sticking them in front of the iPad 24/7. A lot less cooperative and empathetic, I find, because you're not learning to interact, you're learning to in front of an iPad. They always cough on that iPad. Disgusting.
It almost makes me think that as much as it's adults online right now causing the concern, I don't think the regulation needs to be for us right now.
Yes.
But just how's this going to look in the future if we keep going this way?
Totally.
I think it's really scary to think about anything being censored online.
Yeah.
I'm very anti-censorship and anti-banning books. If you take away those reminders of alternative thought and opinions, even if it's bad and morally wrong, it still needs to be there as a reminder of like how people think. These are the consequences of those, and if you just get rid of it, then people are going to think that these are new ideas and reinvent them and be bad with them. It needs to serve as a reminder. So
critical race theory is the one thing that pops in my head in the States right now. Many white conservative parents are against their children learning critical race theory, but it's like, this isn't something new. America was literally built on the backs of slaves, and there are modern inequalities and systemic barriers that prevent black people from succeeding to this day, and that is important to know for kids or for the younger generation, because if they learn it from day one, they'll be more likely to abolish the system. And so many parents are like, this new age propaganda mumbo jumbo. It's like, no, this has always been happening.
We're just not hiding it anymore.
We're just not
teach people to interact with. It's not saying you have to believe one side or the other, but like, these are the pros, cons, consequences, and you can make your own decision.
I feel like Germany has it right. Kids learn early not to be too nationalistic and learn about all the horrors that was like, or that happened during the Holocaust and stuff like that. Kids are drilled into their brains that your parents and grandparents committed horrible atrocities, and that's just the way it's taught, where kids or parents in America now is like, what if my kid gets that he's not black, or that he's not like, oh yeah, There was this mom, and this wasn't satire. She was like, my kid learned about critical race theory and came home crying because he's white.
How does that make sense? I don't know enough about the curriculum being taught.
I watched Peppa Pig as a kid. You don't see me crying because I'm not a pig.
Wow.
I hate it here.
This is awful. Thanks, Marnus, for being on my podcast.
Gosh, of course. Thanks for having me.
Do you want to plug anything? Any final thoughts?
Be gay, do crime.
I love it. That was some big brain activity. I hope this conversation has you thinking more about how you consume digital media. And if you like these topics, you can check out the Social Sleuth socials to stay up to date. Or find me at KennyC402 on Substack, where I post written content. It's basically my little journal where I reflect on these podcasts and sometimes share a favorite meme or two. It's free. Thank you for tuning in. Keep sleuthing.